Hello, this is Alexander Siddig, and you're listening to Kneel Before Pod, and don't tune out.
Kneel Before Blog presents Kneel Before Pod.
Hello, and welcome to a very sombre edition of Kneel Before Pod. I'm your host Craig McKenzie, and this episode exists to say goodbye to a cultural icon. I am of course talking about Hugh Jackman's apparent final outing as the X-Men character Wolverine in James Mangold's Logan, which also sees the end of Patrick Stewart's long run as Charles Xavier. In a slight change from the norm, this podcast will be rated R, or 15 if you happen to be in the UK, just because Logan happens to be aimed at an older audience than normal superhero films.
And with me, my ex-team are Natalie.
Ex-team? Like yes. We're no longer your team?
No, as in you're like the X-Men, not the former team.
Yeah.
But I could see why you might think that.
Present.
I apologise. And Angus.
Hello.
It appears that we're all that's left in this bleak and desolate future.
Hey, wait a minute. Spoiler alert. I also think, spoiler alert for final outing for Hugh Jackman, because I only found that out on Graham Norton. I thought it was going to keep on going.
Well, the poster says one last time, so, you know. It's pretty common knowledge.
Well, if I'd seen that.
Yeah, I'm careful about spoilers. We're fine.
Okay.
So, how are we this evening?
I am trying to be spoiler-free with my feelings.
About how you are?
Yeah.
Not spoil your current feelings of well-being.
No, I just wonder if I can say that. I don't know if I can say how I feel without it being spoiler-free.
I feel fine.
I also feel fine.
You guys are heartless.
Yeah. Well, now that we're all established as fine, and spoilered apparently, let's. Yeah, so it's safe to say that Hugh Jackman's portrayal of Wolverine is some of the most iconic casting ever. Really, he's played the character for about 17, 18 years.
Yeah,
he's been in almost every X-Men film. And
almost? Why? What did he miss?
Deadpool.
Is that an X-Men film though? Really?
He's an X-Men character, so yeah.
There were some X-Men.
There are, yeah.
And they
there's
even
like the
joked about not being able to afford the good X-Men.
I know, but I didn't think it was an X-Men movie. I thought it was like a sideline sort of commentary movie, which was like on the peripheral of the universe.
Well, it is, but it still counts as being part of the X franchise.
Do you think that most people consider it to be an X-Men movie?
Sure.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. So.
It's the only one he missed, although he was only in 2 seconds of First Class as well. So
I think it's a movie that happens to have X-Men in it, but isn't an X-Men movie. But then we digress.
Yeah, we'll be here all night with technicalities, so we'll move on. So his portrayal's been iconic. So I guess we should just start with our personal history of discovering him in this role and what we think of him through the years and through the films and through the good and through the bad. Angus, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. I suppose it's difficult to think of him not as Wolverine now, because he's, as you've said, he's been playing this part for so long. And I think even from the very beginning, he seemed to kind of fit the bill pretty well.
Because he's hot.
I was mainly familiar with the character from the cartoons, but I think that when Hugh Jackman took on the role, he's obviously emerged as one of the sort of most well-loved characters of the movie franchises because he's showed up in so many of them and got his own spin-offs and things. And I think that kind of goes to show just how well he embodied the character.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he's been great in the role. I think when I first saw him, I thought, yeah, he's definitely Wolverine, despite the fact that he's actually too tall. Wolverine is 3'8" or something or 5'8" in the.
3
No,
foot?
it is 3 foot something. I'm sure. He's a short arse, yeah, because he was born in like the 1800s or something. So people weren't as tall back then.
I don't like the idea of a 3'8" Wolverine.
Well,
Nice.
obviously, in the movies, he's kind of grown a bit and fits in
Yeah.
a bit more.
Can I just say that I actually really didn't like X-Men movies when they first started coming out.
You didn't like the X-Men movies?
Yeah. Like out of all the superhero movies and things like that, I just never liked the X-Men movies, and I never read them, and I never watched the cartoon, and I always felt like an outsider watching them because I didn't have all this background knowledge of who all the characters were and what their special powers were, and I don't know, it kind of alienated me, so I never really enjoyed it. But I remember...
Even though the first lot kind of set up the whole
I know,
premise.
but I don't know, maybe I didn't... I feel like I did see them, and I feel like I saw it in the cinema, but I'm feeling like the first one I might have seen might have been my first year of working in the cinema. So what came out in 2005? What was the one?
It's probably X-Men 3.
Oh, well, I feel like I might have seen some of them, but I really I didn't like them at all. And then I saw this one and fucking loved it. Like, it's the first X-Men movie that I've really given a crap about. Like, it's so good.
Yeah, I
I
see
don't
where you're
understand.
coming.
I'm so confused. I'm so confused because it's so brilliant.
I can see where you're coming from with feeling alienated because the first X-Men film, you appear in the middle, pretty much. The mutants are already established, the X-Men are already established, the conflict between Xavier and Magneto has been going on for years, and Wolverine's your intro to that, actually. But also, it was kind of the start of bringing comic book movies back into being credible things. So what you've got is the first film, they don't have their colourful costumes and things, and they exist in a relatively contemporary real world. So, it was the success of that allowed you to get things like Spider-Man in his red and blue suit a couple of years later.
Yeah, and most of the other, well, pretty much all of the X-Men that are in it are already kind of bought into the Xavier ethos. But then you're discovering the world with Wolverine when he's kind of brought into the fold.
Wolverine and not Rogue, but yeah.
Yeah.
I have to be honest though, watching the latest one and how that's all gone about, it's really made me want to go and watch all the other movies, just start back at the beginning and watch them all, because for one thing, it really shows such a passage of time, and it's... When are we in spoiler-free zone?
We're currently in
spoiler-free. I mean, when are we with the spoiler-free zone? Because...
Yeah. The interesting thing about the X-Men films is which beginning would you start from? I mean, you could watch 5 films and get them all erased because there's a time travel reboot at some point.
Oh, that's another thing that kind of pissed me off about these movies. It's not that I'm against that, but I just remember being that's another way of dicking me about when I'm trying to watch this movie, is that they're playing all these multiple timelines and shit, and I just want to know what's going on. I can barely understand what's going on anyway, and then they're making it all weird and stuff. Anyway, I'm gonna start from the actual, the chronological beginning of them making the movies, because that's what I think I want to see. I want to...
Production order. Yeah, it's a good way to start. Yeah.
Yes, production order.
Yeah.
Classic
Fair enough.
Wars approach.
Yeah, let's not get into that.
Yeah.
And let's rate this podcast a 15 because I've sworn a couple of times and I want you to be able to not have to edit it too much.
I'll think about it. Yeah.
Honestly, it proves that things that are rated 15 are better than the shitty 12A things, because I have to be honest, Wolverine as a 15, is it a 15?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my god. Like,
Or R-rated.
I wish that they'd had the gall to do that with the other X-Men, because I feel like that would have pushed it into a zone of like just being so much more entertaining. Like like this one stood apart from all the other ones because it has that extra level of violence and the story needed it, and I feel like that's what's lacked with the other X-Men movies. So I think it was really good to finally see that come about. I think they tried to do that with the Wolverine one that's in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
They sort of brought in more violence that way, but it still wasn't enough.
Well, if you watch the Blu-ray cut, the home version of it, it's much more violent.
Is it?
Yeah, they released a slightly neutered version in cinemas just so it could get a bigger audience.
Oh, that really annoys me. If that's not their vision, I don't know why that's the one that they push out. But the studio dictates these things. Usually, it's not up to the director. Damn it. Well, anyway, for them being able to go straight into the cinema with this one was a really good choice, and it just made for such good viewing. So good.
Yeah. So, Angus, did you like it? We've heard Natalie's spoiler extensive review.
You know, I'm not normally this positive about a movie. It's weird.
I did like it. I think it grew on me because it. I thought the beginning was a bit slow, but then it builds and builds and gets pretty emotional towards the end. So I think that's the right way around. I'd rather have it that way than dive straight into it, be engaged, and then feel myself kind of dropping off towards the end. So I think it went about it the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said before we went in and we watched it, because you'd already seen it, you said that there was a bit where you felt yourself like falling asleep or something, and I
said I was flagging, but that's because it was like after midnight, not because I wasn't enjoying it.
Well, yeah. Bearing that in mind, I remember like it crossed my mind when I was sitting there watching it, and I was like, what the hell was Craig on about? Like, how did he flag? Like, I don't know, it held me the whole time, and
it's to do with an early rise and a late finish.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's my healing factor had been compromised just as Logan. Yeah,
I get that now. I get that.
I also liked it. Can't really say much without spoiling, but yeah, I agree with you, Angus, about it's a bit of a slow burn to begin with, but I think by the time it gets to the end, the slow burn feels earned. Because it's all building towards something, and it establishes the mood of the world that they're in and things like that. So it's it does earn its slow start. And I do think there's a bit in the middle that could have been tightened up slightly, but that's pretty minor, very. But
but I don't think it was. I don't think it was perfect, as I've said. But there's maybe a few kind of tweaks that they could have made, but it builds and kind of reaches a satisfying conclusion of sorts. So
I'm weeping.
I think on that note, we should descend into our berserker rage and just go full spoilers.
Shing, shing. Okay.
That was the noise. It was
very sort of gentle rage.
That's my gentle rage closet.
Yeah. I guess a good way to begin is the story plus the character of Logan, because the two go hand in hand. It is a personal story about Logan. So, and obviously it's an ending of sorts for the character. It's certainly an ending for the...
I love how you've got us starting this bit as talking about the ending.
Well, ending as in the ending of
the character.
Yeah, or this version of the character at least. I mean, was it a good one? Was it a good one, and was it a good way to build up a kind of end of a legacy, so to speak, because he is going to be handing over the keys to the kingdom in a lot of ways, because Hugh Jackman was keeping the X-Men franchise going in its darkest days.
Yeah.
It's basically like a long goodbye for him, because he's obviously pretty broken down at the very start of the film, and so he's not going to get any better, or at least you kind of assume that. And so for the whole thing, it's like a kind of long, slow goodbye, bit of a swan song for him. I think that it's kind of bittersweet like that, because you can kind of feel yourself sort of letting go of the character throughout the whole film.
And, he's tired. Like that's the best way to describe him, certainly at the start of the film. He's just tired of being alive. He's tired of the struggle. He just wants to... You get the feeling he just wants to lay down and die, but he can't. He's dying, but he's not going to die, which is kind of almost disappointing him in a lot of ways.
I think that's where knowledge of the previous films kind of helps, because it's basic, because we've watched it all with him and we've been there along all these different adventures and seen the number of times he's had to kind of regenerate himself. And so you can, as a viewer, get the same sort of feeling of, you can really sort of sympathize with why this character just wants to, end it all, really, just get to the finish line.
Yeah,
it's also set though, like in the future, so it's 2029. I didn't see the last X-Men movie, so I was really confused as to what was going on at the beginning, and it took a wee while for me to be like, oh, like there are no more X-Men, and why is he so fucked up? But you get there, and there's like a line or something where it's like you're trying to kill yourself or something, because he's just drinking all the time and he's not healing, and I don't know, it's really sad.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you see him healing at the start after he gets shot. In previous X-Men films, you see it's a pretty instantaneous process. He's obviously he's in pain, but he gets on with it. But there he's just kind of standing, waiting for it to happen, and it's clearly a struggle, and it's clearly really painful. So it's a nice contrast to how his powers are fading, rather than just how powerful he was at one point.
I think it's so sad though, and they highlight that during the movie, because they bring out like that other Wolverine, like the younger version of him, and it's just, I'm trying to think of my words, like my head is just I'm heartbroken. I'm honestly heartbroken. I was so gutted at the end of the movie, but so elated because it was amazing. But there's just so much, there's a lot of really powerful imagery and stuff in it, and really powerful
I think another
metaphors, like him doing battle with him, like his younger self. And
I think another aspect that's kind of important for the character is how he has always been a bit of an outcast, but he always, is shown as having a family amongst other outcasts, all the sort of misfit X-Men that he always ends up teaming up with. Yeah. But then in this film, he really kind of connects with his father figure, and also realizes about, his legacy, his daughter. Don't know if it's really a sort of exact connection, but his basically his daughter,
because they go about Wolverine as like a family unit when they're when they find places to rest or people to help. Yeah, they are acting as this family unit, like they're pretending. But even Charles Xavier is saying, like, this is just don't worry about anything, enjoy the moment. You've got this family that you wanted, embrace that. And even though it's not real in one sense, it is real for that moment, and he's trying to get him to recognise that could be just as good as having the real thing.
Well, and he's kind of found family throughout his adventures and throughout these films, but I think that this was especially sort of poignant, the way that they went about it in this one.
Yeah, I was having a discussion with someone earlier, and they were saying that in the X-Men films, Wolverine never develops as a character. And when you think about it, it's actually true. He's this kind of the same in X-Men 1 as he is in this film. He's this guy that wants to be left alone, but when he's pushed, he does want to help people, but he doesn't want to help people. He just kind of wants people to get on with their own stuff and not involve them. But once he is involved, he's in it for the long haul. And
I
that's
don't feel like
pretty
I don't
much
feel
what
like
happens
like
here.
that. I don't feel like that at all. I think
When he first meets that woman, he's just like piss off, and then he
yeah, but
and
look
then
at
she appears later, and he's still like piss off, and then
That's
she's
because
about to
she
give him
thinks-
money, and he's like,
Yeah.
"Well, I'll take the money," and then suddenly he's invested. He has to.
Yeah, but she is a signifier of everything he's trying to avoid, like, because he knows that there's like other people who are after him through her, and that that could get him caught up. And it's really because he's not concerned about himself, though. He's concerned about the fact that he's primarily responsible for Charles Xavier's like health and looking after the weird character Stephen Merchant's playing. He's not concerned with himself, and we see that because he's so self-destructive with his drinking and getting into like weird fights that he can barely recover from. But he's motivated as well to be protecting Xavier, so he's like he's such a confused character.
I think that's why he's a successful character as well, is almost that he resets every time, and people kind of know what they're going to get, but they also, if you open up a comic book and Wolverine's there, you kind of expect him to be a certain way, or if you see an episode of the cartoon, you expect him to be a certain way, and it's the same in the films.
You can't say that he's the same person, because
but
he can't be, because if he was...
he kind of is the outsider, wants to be left alone, and as Craig said, always ends up kind of helping people, but then kind of resets again in every episode.
But no, because it's not like that though, because we know from watching the movie that his motive is to protect Charles Xavier and raise money to go get a boat so they can go live out on the sea.
Yeah,
Just
but that's
the two
someone
of
that
them.
he's built a relationship with. If he was a sort of prototypical superhero, the woman that asks him for help at the very beginning, he would, out of a sense of honor or justice or whatever, he would, he'd think, I'm a superhero, a costume wearing vigilante. Of course, I'll drop everything and help you. But instead, he sort of forges on with his mission to kind of save his mentor.
Yeah, I'm not denying that though. I'm just saying that Craig's saying that he is this same character without any development. I'm like, well, no, because actually he's caring for an old man with like Alzheimer's or something, and he's worried about him, and he's worried about them getting found or him getting taken away from him or losing him. That's like his main concern.
He didn't like Charles Xavier at the beginning of the first X-Men film, and then he liked him by the end of it.
And that's just the situation he's currently in as well. I mean, if you look at X-Men 1 through 3, and then the Wolverine, which is the only film that's set after that at the moment. So you've got, through X-Men 1, 2, and 3, he kind of gets used to the idea of being part of this team and being part of this family. And then he's forced to kill Jean Grey, which then causes him to go out on his own again because he feels like he attracts trouble and would rather be away from it all. So, and it's quite common in the comics as well. He would go out on his own for a bit, and then he would find himself stuck in a situation that he never asked for, and he gets used to it, and then it ends tragically, and he goes off on his own again, and repeat. It's interesting because he's such a loner, but he's been on more teams than anyone else in Marvel Comics.
But I suppose that's just the nature of sort of episodical or comic book storytelling, isn't it? That you've always kind of got to go back to the sort of the starting point.
Yeah. Wolverine always has to be a certain way. If he settles down with a wife and kids, then that's just not him. But and I think this film, he's keen to protect his own little bubble and nothing else. So he doesn't want to be involved in anything else, which is really consistent with how the character is portrayed. So his bubble is himself, Caliban, and Xavier. Nothing else. That's why he's not interested in looking after some little girl that he doesn't know, because that becomes his problem, and he doesn't want.
Has Caliban been in any other movies?
Sort of.
Well, what do you mean, sort of?
There is a non-mutant called Caliban in X-Men Apocalypse, who is good at finding mutants.
Is that the last one that we watched? No, that's the one that we didn't see because that came out last year. Is that right?
Yes, it's rubbish.
Right. Oh, I didn't see it.
Yeah, but he's in that, but he's not a mutant, and he's just some guy that's really resourceful.
Does he look like himself, or is he like all?
No, he's bald, but that's it.
Right, so he doesn't look like what he does in this one.
That's pretty.
I suppose it's because time's passed,
That's
isn't
pretty
it?
hideous from your point of view.
12 years. No, it just means like, well, he's got like some sort of weird condition.
Well, that's just his mutancy. You know, he looks like that because that's how he looks. That's just genetically how he looks.
Right.
That's it.
I am. So, is it Stephen Merchant in the other movie as well?
No, I forget the actor's name, but it's not him.
Because I found it really odd that, I don't know, like when I saw that character appear, like the tone of the movie when you start watching it is quite serious. And then and this isn't because of his acting, because I really like him, but obviously I associate him as being some sort of comic relief to an extent. And so when he appears, and I think they do try and use him a little bit like that at the beginning, but it really threw me off the movie a little bit. Like, I found it really odd, and it took a lot of the movie for me to be okay with him being in it. I found him a really odd choice.
I suppose he does have a few sort of comic lines. He kind of spars.
He has a few jokes, but he's not a funny character. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and I think he sort of commands that. Like, not even commands. It's just what I associate with him now, I think.
You're kind of programmed to expect him to be a funny character.
But the thing is, then they do give him quite a few opportunities for. I definitely giggled at something, or maybe I sneered at it. I don't remember.
Well, there's that line about.
He's like, that was my favourite mug or something, and you're like, oh, ho, ho, ho. But then I was
there's a line where he says to Logan about shooting himself, "I just mopped these floors."
Yeah.
You know, and it's not that funny because they're making light of suicide, but I guess it's a more comedic line than most.
Yeah.
I
think if it had been another person who was an actor not normally known for their comedy, I think I would have found that funnier, or black humor type stuff. But I don't know. It didn't sit with me right. Like for a lot of the movie, but I have to be honest, I did change my mind about him when we got nearer his end.
Well, when I heard that Stephen Merchant was going to be in it, I automatically assumed he was going to be comic relief comedy sidekick, and I wasn't looking forward to having to deal with that. But I was pleasantly surprised, and it seems like the guy has range that I didn't know existed. Yeah. Maybe he didn't know it existed.
I think. I think that's why I feel bad, because I didn't know he was going to be in it, and so I didn't have that sort of I don't know, I just didn't think about it. And then when I saw him, I was a bit like, oh, what? Like, I really like him, but it took me out of the movie a little bit.
It's maybe because of your baggage that you bring by knowing the actor rather than anything else. Yeah. But I was actually trying to figure out why that character was used specifically. I mean, ultimately he proves to be, an enabler for the villains to find out where they've been because he has that tracking ability. But before that point, it could have essentially been anyone.
What do you mean, like any character at all?
Because there's nothing
there of Charles.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean so like they've chosen him particularly because he lends himself to the story of being useful? Yeah,
he gets to. Yeah, he's useful in the letting the villains find out where they are without too much explanation. But before that point, he's just some guy that hangs around with Logan and Charles. Who, helps them out. I've never
seen him before. I had no idea like where he came from, and like it must just be because I didn't see the last movie. But like I've never heard of him or seen him, so I had no idea who this person was who was so closely associated with two of the main characters.
Yeah, and ultimately is probably one of the smaller roles, but he does enough to facilitate what goes on. Like he helps the villains find them, or he stalls the villains from finding them more accurately. And he's just kind of there as an extra person to tell Logan about how screwed up he is.
I think his presence there is just part of what you have to accept about Charles living in a downed water tower and Wolverine kind of crossing the border to keep bringing him drugs. You're just introduced to this particular storyline, timeline, and you just kind of have to accept that it's the two of them out there in the desert.
Yeah. And I think the desert was an interesting choice as a setting because, well, obviously, I suppose it's a bit cheaper in terms of filming, but it automatically brings you into this, even though the society isn't decimated, it does feel a bit desolate, because he's only ever in small towns, and or at least in the beginning, he's only in low populated areas, and it's really dusty and it looks uncomfortable, and it really adds into this whole almost apocalyptic feel when it's not apocalyptic at all.
Yeah, it definitely felt
that plus the road trip aspect gave it a kind of Mad Max Fury Road sort of bent to it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of like helping people in like really old-fashioned ways, like with horses that have escaped onto a road that's got weird. What was the vehicles that were there? Are they just like self-driven vehicles?
Automatic trucks.
Right.
Yeah. With the really ham-fisted line, I hate auto trucks.
Yeah, I know.
So that's what they are.
I think we could have done without that. It was pretty obvious what was going on.
But it's weird because it is kind of like apocalyptic because you've got people who are trying to transport horses who need help, and then they help them, and it's like this weird basic human connection thing. I don't know. It felt
well. I mean, for Logan, it is an apocalypse. His kind are mostly dead. He's one of the last of his kind. So, humans are thriving, fair enough. And you can probably imagine there are still giant cities around the world. You see a hint of that. But for Logan, there's nothing left. His people aren't alive anymore. He's, he's losing everything that defined him.
His heart is the desert.
He's being pushed to the fringes of society.
Yeah.
His heart is the desert.
But then he was always part of the fringe. I don't think he would...
That doesn't mean he has a comedy show in Edinburgh in August.
An
hour with Wolverine.
For what are we on? Because all I can think about is how sad I am. I'm not over this.
But yeah, I like how the character's explored throughout the film. He's again stuck in a messy situation, and he's always tired, but he kind of fights on because he doesn't know how to do anything else. And he's invested in protecting Charles, really. When Laura turns up, she's only being protected by him because she won't go away at first. Everything's about protecting Charles. There's even the bit where that poor family are killed. When Laura's been carried off, and he goes right for Charles first.
Yeah.
That shows where his loyalties are.
Yeah. But that's because he probably knows, though, that the girl is capable. I think he...
Not at that point she wasn't. She was like, trust up.
No, when the family are killed.
Yeah, but he also doesn't go immediately to help any of the family members. He kind of steps over people and goes for Charles immediately.
You had to tell him that it wasn't him.
Well, no, but I think it's because he's come so far and done so much to try and get to this point.
Yeah, but he goes so Xavier has been stabbed by the younger Wolverine.
X-24 for reference.
For some reason, we don't call his brother or his son, despite Laura being known as his daughter, which is really confusing. So the younger Wolverine guy stabs him.
Charles.
Goes away, slaughters this innocent family, and then is outside with Laura. And the first thing he does is go and says to Charles, that wasn't me, because he's so scared that he would have a bad impression of him. And that would be his dying thought.
Yeah, that was pretty sad.
Oh.
Yeah,
I mean... The whole Charles thing is so sad. It's such a comment on so many things that's bigger than X-Men, which I just thought maybe that... I think that's why I loved it so much, actually. It's just that it is dealing with so many issues that are so relevant, actually. So even though it's this superhero movie with mutants and it's set in the future and it's this weird apocalyptic setting, it actually has so much in it that is so relevant to the state of affairs that I think America is in, actually, and a lot of the world, free healthcare for one. Do you know what I mean? Why is Wolverine having to go and bribe drugs from a doctor to try and help Xavier, who has like dementia. Like, it's just really sad. There's no healthcare in place for helping old people, and there's nothing in place for, obviously he's like an X-Men, but there's nothing in place for any of that. And it's like watching him break down and having like his headaches, which wipes out everyone's abilities to fucking stand up and shit. But like, I don't know, it's just so tragic. And
it was a pretty sad end for him after seeing him being so idealistic and kind of thinking that there's good in humanity and in mutants, and always thinking that people can live together, and all the things he's been through to sort of end up
bedridden in his wheelchair, refusing to take his medicine and having to live in a water tank and look after like some plants with like false sunlight and on his own. Like, he's just on his own. Like, he's a lonely old man with health issues that's locked inside fucking water tower. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so brutally sad.
But the whole him not being in hospital thing is also explained in the film. He was essentially classified as like most wanted.
Because like a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah.
No, I know, but I just...
So he couldn't be near people, because he would be found out, and there's too much risk involved with that.
I get that for the character. Yeah. What I mean is that I do think that it's like a comment on larger social issues that particularly surround America. There's you could say that Xavier at one point was maybe like a war hero because he's like stopped bad people and stuff like that, and now he's got issues and stuff. No one's there to help him. There's no support system in place for supporting him when he needs it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that.
Well, I mean, it's pretty tragic because he ran the school. He was helping mutants. Were starting to thrive. He was championing agenda. Things were good at one point, and he was doing good. And then suddenly it just all flips to the point where he loses everything. In fact, he destroys everything that he built. Because it's not quite mentioned, but it's almost mentioned that one of his seizures caused the death of several of the X-Men. So, he destroyed the thing he built, which is, Shakespearean in its tragedy. So it's, it's a really harrowing end. And I find it interesting to see a character that, when people look to for answers in earlier films, he's the guy that knows the answers. He's kind of not always right, but, you can probably count on him to be, the moral person in a conversation. And now he's just a crazy, rambling old man who's cutting about in a water tower, just not knowing who his friends are and things like that. But there's also shades of the lucidity of the original version of the character in there as well. There's points where he wakes up.
Definitely.
Which is, again, quite real for, I guess, Alzheimer's sufferers, because they do have their moments, where they're their old selves again, and you see the old Xavier now and again.
And it's funny because I think he's actually quite lucid a lot of the time. There's the time where Wolverine thinks he's making crap up about talking to a little girl, but then she appears and he's already been communicating with her, and they share quite a few like on-screen moments where we know that they're talking to each other, but nothing's said, and it's nice. And
I think it's interesting that he's still kind of teaching Logan lessons even to the very end. Logan was always kind of a resistant student, but then as he gets on and he kind of sees Charles breaking down and stuff, but he's still kind of I think he's still learning from him.
He does.
Well, I mean, Charles still has hope, and Laura represents that hope, but he's sitting there saying, look, this is a mutant. We haven't had this in a while. Look, things can get better. You can get better. And Logan's like, no, let's just get out of here. And that back and forth happens quite a lot, but Xavier is still trying to tell him to be, to be better, not to succumb to these animalistic urges he constantly has.
But he's also teaching him to, like I said at the beginning, though, like really embrace the moments that he does have, and not to think about what he doesn't have, and that, you know, that whole family thing that he ends up developing with Xavier and Laura. You know, it's not that that's not real, because there's a part of it where you're like, they're pretending to be like a family sat at a dinner table, and it's a lovely moment for them all, and it's quite funny because she doesn't know how to use cutlery and stuff, and it's just quite almost like a wee bit animalistic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it's quite cute.
And that whole section of the film, it kind of proves both Xavier and Logan right, because Charles wants to, you know, settle down, have a bit of a moment, you know, with with a nice family. They just want to behave like people for once. Yeah. And then, but Wolverine's fears come true, and he attracts trouble, which gets his family killed, which wouldn't have happened had they not stayed. So, you know, they're both right in that situation. Logan does attract trouble, but does that mean he doesn't deserve to behave like a human being now and again? So, you know, it's that conflict, you know, as in, this is what happens when I slow down. Yeah. Honestly,
when that happened, like, see when it cuts to that scene where Charles has been stabbed, and it's by this younger Wolverine, and you think, oh my god, is he having like a nightmare? Is this like some sort of really mental dream? And then it's like the kid, like the son of the family, that gets like totally slashed, and then you're like, holy shit, no, that's like a totally other Wolverine. And then that's like a total like head mess. But that honestly like was really upsetting, because you want everything to work out for him like so badly. You want everything to go just right for once, and I really wanted Xavier to be right about him having that moment.
I think it speaks to just how much, as a viewer, that whole sequence kind of meant to you, to see especially Charles and Logan, who'd been on the run, and Laura as well, because she'd kind of escaped from this this life that was all she'd known, and they were getting to experience a bit of normalcy and a bit of family life, and to see the innocence in that scene getting kind of cut down by 24 is just, you know,
brutal.
You're so used to seeing kind of mass destruction and things in superhero movies, and obviously plenty of innocent people get injured and hurt and killed and things, but in this one it was really affecting, because they're, you know, these are actually people that, you know, were showing the X-Men kind of,
civility.
Yeah, and a normal, if you want to use that word, way of life, and just accepted them into their home, and then were just brutally kind of cut down.
Yeah, because you really get to see those characters, and there's really nice moments with them, and it was so brutal just doing that, because I think, in any other movie or X-Men, it's normally, if anyone's dying, it's an X-Men or, you know, Bad Men. So it's not really, they don't really tend to have,
they don't dwell on the
character development, or
and it's usually people kind of
level of
getting
entry.
Crushed in buildings that are falling down and things, or, you know, you don't see the sort of human face of the
that's it, the human face of them. But
there was a similar sort of moment in the X-Men Origins Wolverine film. It's just after he gets his adamantium infusion, he kind of takes refuge in this farmhouse. With this elder couple, and essentially the same thing happens. You know, he's found by the people looking for him, and they kill those old people, and
well, they're old. They're not a young family. They're old.
They're still completely innocent, though. You know,
I know, but it's easier to deal with when they're old, like, than this young family with a child. Like, oh my god.
No, I think I still think that this sort of comparison, the sort of the six of them sitting around the dinner table beforehand, really like lays it on thick when you see the family getting slaughtered.
Yeah. By somebody that they and the fact that they die thinking that they've been betrayed by them. Is so sad, because they think, like, the dad doesn't die, and he comes out and then shoots X-24, but then turns on Hugh Jackman and goes
They're
to
both
shoot
Hugh
him.
Jackman.
No, I know, but I mean the real one.
Hugh
The real one.
Good Jackman.
He goes to shoot him, but he's out of like bullets and then collapses. But he thinks like they've gone from having this bond, and he thinks that he was betrayed and that he's in on it because they look the same, and it's just so sad that, you know, his Wolverine's worries were that Charles would die thinking it was him, and yet because he cares what people think about him, he does, and he doesn't get to clear his name to this family who think that he has something to do with what happened to them, and it's a
kind of the whole X-Men story kind of summed up in that one relationship where they always try and do good, but then people see the destruction that they've been part of.
Or as long as they pretend to be human, they're accepted. But as soon as the truth comes out, you know. But there's also I think there's at least I get the sense that the father understood what was going on.
I don't think
but
he
also,
did.
But also blamed. Well, he understood that this younger Logan wasn't the same Logan, right? But I think he resents him for bringing this on, because clearly there's a connection, and clearly that connection was brought by them taking these people into their lives. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you can see how the resentment would come, and I quite like how it wasn't I realised this wasn't you. I like how he was going to shoot him, but ran out of bullets.
Yeah, but so he tried to shoot him. It's not like he realises, oh, you're not that person, so I'm not going to shoot you and I'll die now. It's there's two of you, I'll shoot both of you. Yeah.
He doesn't understand. He understands but doesn't forgive. I think that's
right. Well, when I was watching, I didn't interpret it that way.
He was also at the point of death, so
yeah. I didn't interpret it that way. He looked betrayed, though. Like thinking. The guy's face, the guy when he falls to the ground, he looks so betrayed because he doesn't understand. I don't think he understands at all what's happened, and I think that is what makes that scene so sad. Is that Wolverine's able to tell Charles, this wasn't me, it was somebody else, but he doesn't get that opportunity with the innocent.
That kind of goes to my point about the sort of wider X-Men franchise and how they're always trying to help people, and then when things go wrong, the people they're trying to help turn on them, and even though, you know, they have been helped, they still turn on the X-Men, and they always end up turning on them because no matter how much they try and help them, they're always seen as different or outsiders or, you know, what have you.
And also, I like the idea of X-24 as well, because Wolverine has spent a long time trying to sort of suppress his more animal side. You know, he's trying to be a functional human being in a lot of ways. But then what you've got is people only appreciate him, or a lot of people only appreciate him for what he can do and what he's capable of. So in the kind of X-24 is the physical embodiment of that. In effect, like he's I suppose. I don't think it's actually conscious, but it's an animal. You know, it is the animal side of Logan.
Yeah.
And it lets him confront his animal side. And it's interesting how his animal side just wins. You know, the man doesn't stand a chance because he's just not strong enough.
Because he cares.
Well, yeah, there's certain things holding him back, yeah.
I thought it was really interesting, but it did confuse me a little bit during the movie so I was really, when I saw the first trailer for Logan, and you see a little girl, like, hold his hand, and you're like, holy shit! And then the whole time they're like, oh, who does she look like? Who does she look like? And they totally try and make it that his lover had a baby, but that's not how Laura came into being. Like, she was created, and they try the whole time to totally mislead you.
Wolverine, Jean Grey sort of thing.
Do you know how she's in the car and she's playing with the lock on the door, and then he's like, stop it, and she keeps on doing it, and you think, like, they totally make you think she's doing it with her mind, and that she's moving the lock up and down with her mind, and then you see it when it cuts again, like, back to him and back to her, and it's just her hand over the switch, moving the lock on the door up and down with her fingers, and you're like, fucking, they had me. Like, they totally make you think that she was using mind powers. And then they totally try and make you think that she is of them both, but she's not. She's been created, and I don't understand how they can call her his daughter and play on his heartstrings like that, and then X-24 is no relation. If they're created of all the same genetic material and everything, he fucking looks the exact same as him.
Well,
why is he not known as his brother?
Well, Laura was born. Like they talk about how the kids were grown in the bellies of Mexican women or whatever.
That's
but
right.
X-24 was grown in a lab. You know, you see him in the vat and stuff like that.
So because she was born from a person,
she's a test tube baby, essentially.
She's the product of Logan plus
some Mexican women.
Animalistic X-24. How's that lesser a creation?
I think it depends how you look at it as well. I mean, X-24 clearly has no humanity about it at all. So it's just a weapon, you know, that's being used. But Laura definitely has a personality.
Yeah.
You know, you see that early on, and what it does is it shows you this long video of them. Look at these kids; they're actually kids, but they're treated like property. Yeah. And then at the end, it's like, but they're building something else, you know. And when that something else is obviously X-24, but before that, it establishes the humanity of all these children to give them to make them worth saving.
What do you think about the way that they portray Laura at the beginning when they try and make it look like she is of Jean Grey and Wolverine?
Well, I never got that impression because I know who the character is in the comics. So I always knew that as soon as they announced that Daphne Keane, some newcomer to acting, will be playing Laura Kinney, aka X-23, I knew exactly, or I could guess what story they were going to tell. But you obviously don't have that connection. You don't know who she is.
I didn't have that at all. Yeah. And then, I don't know, I feel like I've totally read scenes, but I feel like I wouldn't be the only person who's read the scenes like that, though. I feel
if you didn't know who X-23 is, then
purposeful to have done that. And I don't get why Xavier pushes for Hugh Jackman to... I keep on jumping between, actors and character names. I keep on doing it. They've got too many names. He jumps between, really forcing him to consider, but who does she remind you of? I don't think he's saying, it's yourself. He's totally pushing for her to be a reminder of Jean Grey, and is it just to build that a fast emotional connection to her so that he protects her and gets her to this Eden place, you know? Or why did they do that? Why did they keep pushing
that line comes after you see her, gut people with claws. So, the reminder is pretty clear.
Which is badass.
Yeah, and I quite liked how Laura was done in this film. I actually think she was better before she talked.
Yeah, I actually felt
she was kind of shrill and annoying when she spoke, but before that, I think the actress did a really good job of conveying exactly what she needed to convey without saying a word.
Her eyes are incredible.
She's very expressive. Yeah.
Oh, and I see that scene where she's sitting eating her cereal, and the guys come in, and she's just sort of not moving, but she has definitely acknowledged that they're there. Oh, she was great. I think she captured me.
The violence as well was obviously pretty hardcore, but then seeing a young girl just tearing through this sort of elite unit as well made it even more sort of hardcore to see her do this. And they didn't shy away from beating her up either as well.
Yeah.
You know?
And so many headshots. Jeez.
Yeah. And they had that brief moment where she was using her claws to cut herself as well.
Yeah.
To obviously test her healing ability, but then that's a very kind of expressive, childlike thing, isn't it?
Yeah, testing yourself to see what you can do. I fucking loved the violence, and I feel I feel bad saying that, but it needed it. And see the scenes where Wolverine and Laura are fighting all the bad guys. They were amazing. I enjoyed watching that so much, and it was honestly so cute that there were audible gasps. I just thought it was the most adorable thing ever.
Adorable. Wow. Adorable, most adorable
It
mother.
was, honestly, if you looked at me, I had like my hands up to like my chest and my face, and I was like, oh my god, it was so cute.
Such sweet slaughter.
It
Well,
was.
the best Wolverine scene before this one was in X2. You know, when he goes berserk and runs through the mansion just cutting people. But even then, there's a PG-13ness about that as well, because there's, you know, you don't really see any blood, and you see claws go into people, but, you know, a lot of it's left up to the imagination. But it's interesting.
Bloody and great.
Yeah. But it's interesting how in the X-Men films before this one, even his solo films, he's, you know, Wolverine has somehow censored his speech, even though the character would never do that. You know, this is a character that just, you know, every second line is a swear word. And
even Charles gets to swear in this as well.
Yeah, it's something quite jarring about hearing Captain Picard swear.
I loved it. I thought it was great.
As for Wolverine and the swearing thing, they've definitely embraced it more and more in the last couple of movies, and I think it's gone that way of having that more gritty character.
Yeah, I mean,
it definitely works.
He's a character that wouldn't speak like he does in the X-Men films because that's just not who he is. But he has to because he's, you know, because he's in a PG-13 film. It's like in Last Action Hero when the kid shows Arnie a word written on a piece of paper and says "say that," and he refuses to say it because it's not an R-rated film, you know, that he's sucked into.
I love that.
Yeah, that's like, I suppose, yeah, you're right. Wolverine just kind of gets away with being as much of a smartass as he can be.
Yeah,
he
stops just short of being really like foul with his language.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that Laura spoke Spanish, but understood like English. Like, where did she have the? Where did she learn all of that?
There's a bit of sort of crossover where she would speak
in Spanish, understanding the English, and then speaking English but with an accent. And I was like, who taught you?
I think you just have to accept
English?
that by the end of it.
I was thinking about this, and I wonder if it was Xavier that taught her how to speak English.
What, in 5 seconds?
Well, he's a telepath.
Yeah.
He could, in theory, impart a lot of information very quickly.
Perhaps. I'll take that because it means I don't have to think about it.
That's my we nerds.
That's in the Fifth Element when she's like learning English. Yeah. She's like,
see, we nerds call it headcanon. You know, when you come up with your own explanation for why something happened. So I think Xavier teaches Laura how to speak.
Yeah, I'll totally go with that because, you know, if that's what the characters can do, then I'm sure that's what they've done.
It's the point she starts speaking I find quite interesting because she refrains from doing so up until that point. And is it maybe because she's sort of processing her humanity, and then because she's very feral before that point.
Yeah, she is, and that feral is a great word actually because
word of the day.
Yeah, but for her character, absolutely, and you can see it in her face and in her eyes, and in the way that she guards her bag, and the way that she, like, you know, it's her property. She doesn't want anyone touching it. It's the only thing she's got, and she guards it. And she's so, you know, she's really uptight about that. And great word. I forgot.
I also like that she takes in the world like she's seeing it for the first time. You know, she's very curious about everything, and she doesn't understand that stealing is wrong, and because she hasn't had those lessons taught to her, because you know she was raised as a weapon to begin with. But I think
that scene when she's like going around with the Pringles and stuff, and she gets her shades, but Wolverine comes in when she's like when she like pulls her claws on that guy who's working there, and he comes in and he's like, "No, you don't do that in public," and takes out the shop. It was so funny. It was so cute and lovely wee life lesson.
I thought she was pretty restrained because she was, she seemed to pay attention to her daddy quite a lot, even though she could have just like kicked off and
had to be back.
I mean, Wolverine does have to smack her around a few times. You know?
I just got a message from my friend Catherine, and she just said, "Yup, I was not ready for that," because she just went to see it tonight, and I thought she was going to see it yesterday, and I got to work thinking I'm going to get to talk about this with someone because she loves the X-Men. And I thought, right, I'm definitely going to get to have some chat with her about this. And I can't wait until I'm working with her again so we can talk about everything we've already talked about. But I just need to keep on talking about it.
Well, Catherine, if you're listening, I hope you enjoyed it. She's not listening.
She's not, probably not.
Well, you can advertise.
I'll have to like, oh, there's a personal.
There's a shout out.
Personal shout out for you. No, but seriously, I said to her, like, it's fucking brilliant, but it's also like, can I just say why I think it's brilliant? I know we've not gone through a lot of her stuff yet, but like, I felt like, because, right, Logan dies, right? For people who didn't know that.
Double spoiler alert.
Wolverine is dead. Xavier is dead.
Niedermeyer, dead.
The only person who's left is Laura and her little pals who can breathe frost and shit. So, anyway.
Breathe frost.
Wolverine dies, right? Wolverine dies. She cries, calls him daddy.
No.
That is gutting. But I think
what's a film she saw like a day ago, you know.
The most gutting thing is that it's like the death of childhood. See that kid when they have that funeral for him, and he's clutching his Wolverine toy. This is a kid who's just come out of a facility that was going to murder them all because they're weapons who have feelings, has a fucking old school Wolverine action figure clutched at Wolverine's funeral. That is sad. It's so sad. And I just feel like watching it and seeing young Hugh Jackman, like computerized Wolverine X-24, battling against him who's raggedy ass, totally fucked up body and stuff, is totally a comment on like this whole passage of time. And I don't know, I felt so sad, like not just for the movie but for myself, because I'm like, I'm fucking old. Like, the first one
I remember when Wolverine was that young.
The first one came out in 2000. Like, it's 17 years, and I came home, and I think it was like the next day. So what was that? Tuesday? Yesterday. There was like somebody had shared a montage, and it's like this montage set to Johnny Cash's version of Hurt, which closes, I think, the movie actually.
No.
At the end credits.
The man comes around.
It's not.
Is it? Is it that one?
It was on the trailer.
Oh, it's on the trailer, right? Well, there's a montage, and it's basically like the start of Wolverine and the end of Wolverine, and it's like the whole of the 17 years, and this tremendous wave of nostalgia just like overtook me and transported me back to so many different places in my life where I'd remember these movies coming out, what I was doing, like who I was hanging out with, and to the end. And it's actually like so sad because I'm like
he's been with us.
He's been with us the whole way, and it's like, I can't use my words. I'm trying to say something here that makes sense, that conveys just how emotional I felt watching this montage. We're going to have to get a link for it so people can watch it.
Shout out to Charles Xavier, who was also buried in this film.
Also buried.
In his own very sad funeral scene.
In a forest by water.
At least he has water, yeah.
He's got water. Oh.
Go batter my truck.
Yeah, but he was old.
And I quite like the frustration that he couldn't even do meaningful damage to the truck as well. You know, this is a guy that could tear someone apart in 3 seconds, and now he just can't even break a truck.
Just, you know, I just thought, like, we've had this journey with Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, and I remember, because I watched the Graham Norton where they were on it, and he talks about how somebody will replace him and stuff like this, but he hopes it's like in a few years or something. And I was like, I don't want anyone to replace him. I don't want anyone at all. They fucking keep on recasting Spider-Man. Leave it. I don't want to see anyone else come in and take over this role, because it had the perfect ending, and I don't think we need to bring that back. Like, we've had this journey. It was incredible. Sometimes, actually only at the end, but
I think the send off for Wolverine, and to a lesser extent, my man Charles Xavier, kind of takes over a lot of the film, and so it kind of, as evidenced by the fact that we haven't really even spoken about the bad guy, like the main bad guy, or
no one
much
gives
of
a
the
shit about them.
much of the rest of the plot.
And I love Richard E. Grant, but
Yeah, exactly.
come on.
E. Grant, and yet we've just. I mean, you're kind of completely consumed. Not you.
I am consumed by the fact that
you and the hypothetical
over.
you are also like, it's all about the end of this icon. Wolverine.
Well, on the Richard E. Grant character, I really like the bit at the end where he's like, well, first I'm going to tell you my horrific plan, and then Logan just shoots him when he's halfway through explaining it. So it's kind of like he's all so I wiped out all the mutants, and I'm going to design my own mutants, and I'm going to figure out how to perfect humanity, and it's just bang. He doesn't even get to finish. It's just, this film isn't about these kind of big plans. It's about Logan having one last hurrah, and all these villains do is enable that. So what you've got is I quite liked Boyd Holbrook's character. I thought he was good, but he did a lot of good with a very thinly written character.
Yeah.
Is he the guy with the robot hand?
Yeah.
He's kind of hot.
I spent the whole film thinking, where have I seen him before? And it was only until today when I was looking through his IMDb and I was like, no, not that. No. Oh, Narcos. I loved him in Narcos, and I love Narcos. And he was really good in Narcos. He was he was recognizable enough that I could tell that I'd seen him before. But
yeah,
I've watched two whole seasons of Narcos, and I still didn't twig that it was him until I looked at
his True Blood as well, or am I making that up?
I think that was someone else.
Right.
Have I seen him in anything?
I've never seen him.
I liked him. I liked him.
He was fine, but the character was pretty one note. I just think he had enough charisma to make it, to hide that, and obviously it wasn't about him. He's just someone to talk to Logan about things at one point, and his ending is a bit. I mean, he's killed by all the kids, and I quite like that because he's kind of.
I was wondering why they didn't do that sooner. How have they got all of these powers, and they're only now just fucking using it on that guy? Did they not think of using their powers before? Did somebody tell them not to? Since when do kids listen to fucking adults anyway? I
think they must have had some way of suppressing them in the facility.
Well, they had them all in those like weird metal things and stuff. Yeah. But how does that stop somebody from making your head frozen and then punching it to break it into a bajillion pieces, like in the Terminator?
Well, whatever. It was a good end that he got like almost every single one of their different powers done on him, just so that he could die.
Yeah, and obviously X-24 was just a statement of Logan's animal side. So in terms of villains, this film doesn't have the best villains, but
I don't think he was just the animalistic side. I think he was also portraying the youth and the passage of time. Even though he's been made and he's essentially a robot, I think he's more than just the animalistic side of Wolverine, actually. I think he
but think about it like this. That bullet that Logan had been carrying around the whole time for himself ended up in
He
X-24.
didn't carry it around for himself.
It shot.
Yeah, he did. He says he was going to shoot himself.
It killed the animal side of him, so that all that was left after the animal side of him was the humanity.
And it's interesting how his last words to Laura are about not being an animal, not being what they wanted her to be. Yep. And that's kind of the message at the end of the film. He keeps telling her to find a way to live with what she's done, and she's kind of okay with killing people because they're not good people, but as far as he's concerned, it doesn't get any easier no matter who you're murdering.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of parallels to be drawn there, and I think that Laura is a good character that could progress more if they decided to. But and a lot of people have said that it sets itself up for a sequel, and it does. But I think the open-ended nature of these kids going off to God knows what is fine because it is from Logan's perspective, and he doesn't get to see what happens next.
Mm-hmm.
The world moves on without him at this point. After this point,
no, it definitely lends itself to them having their own little adventure, setting up their own school and getting a new
baby X-Men
guy. I don't want to see that though, and I don't think it's necessary.
I quite like the open-ended nature of it.
I think us imagining that they've gone and made it to Canada, is enough. I don't need to be like, why were they trying to get to Canada?
because it promises safety. It's like every season of The Walking Dead. We'll go here because I've heard it's safe.
Like in real life.
Tons of maple syrup as well.
Let's get to Canada.
Yeah.
I think it's
kind of where it all started, you know. That's where Logan is from.
That's where he's from.
I heard that. I didn't know that until Gus told me when I was like, why the fuck were they trying to get to Canada? I just thought it was because they had free healthcare and they were nice. Oh, well.
But there's been a lot of chat about how this film isn't set in the wider X-Men universe. It's its own little bubble. You know, it's the way I think about it is in comics. Occasionally, a writer will have an idea and they'll write a 5-issue mini-series about it, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything else. You know, the story that this was loosely, and I use the term loosely as an operative term, that it's based on. It's a story called Old Man Logan, where it's a very old Wolverine in an apocalyptic future, and it's much bleaker than this. It's not very good, to be honest. I didn't like it, but the idea is that Mark Millar had an idea and wrote a story about it, and it doesn't represent the future of the Marvel universe. So, like, this film doesn't represent the future of the other X-Men films. It's just its own little story that exists by itself. And obviously, we live in an age of cinematic universes. You know, we did a podcast on it, shared universes and so on. So, is it a good idea to tell a little standalone bubble story now and again? You know, if you really want to.
I think it is, but I don't personally see this as being apart from the rest of them. I kind of view it as being all part of the same storyline, and in a way, it's obviously really emotional and kind of it's a really sad end to these characters that you've been following for so long. And in a way, it's a bit like spoiler alert for Star Wars: The Force Awakens. after the party on Endor and destroying the second Death Star, we go back years later to find older characters who end up getting killed off. Yeah. You know, the last time we saw them was at the point of celebration, and they'd won basically, and now you have to go back and then have this kind of depressing, revisiting of them. But I think for this, I think it worked really well, and they had to kind of sign Wolverine and Xavier off at some point, so this was quite a.
And there is connective tissue to the other X-Men films, but it's quite loose. You know, they mention the Statue of Liberty, which people will know from the first film, and there's, you have to vaguely know what a mutant is, and you have to know who Wolverine is, and so on. But these miniseries that I'm talking about, they assume that you know the broad strokes of the universe you're reading, and you're willing to just get a story that assumes all that knowledge already, and you just get on with it. And I don't for a second think that this is the future of the current crop of X-Men films, because it kind of writes them into a corner that way, so it makes it feel like, well, if they're all just going to get wiped out anyway, what's the point of anything? And
how can there be any more to do? Like, I really feel like X-Men shouldn't even bother making anything again, because it's never going to be as good as this.
Well, they're only in the 80s in X-Men Apocalypse, so there's still a number of years to tell stories.
Oh my god!
There's all sorts of things they can do with X-Men films. There's hundreds and hundreds of characters that they could focus on. I mean, most of them aren't that good, but some of them are.
They already time travel, so they've already kind of introduced the idea of alternate timelines. So
yeah, but this film is its own world. It's vaguely connected, but it's not completely connected. It isn't like a sequel in the strictest sense. So, yes. And I do think it's a good idea to just move away from that and tell a different story now and again. I mean, what you're going to get is a lot of people saying, "Oh, every superhero film should be its own little bubble, and every superhero film should be R-rated to explore more mature themes." Blah blah blah. But I think that kind of misses the point of why this film works. And this film works
because it sets it apart.
This film works because people cared about it when they made it, and there was no real attempt to tie it into continuity, but you can still make good continuity-driven stories anyway. But it works because it's its own little thing, and it's a good own little thing. I mean, you could apply a similar template to almost anything and come up with garbage. And you see so many copycat films of things that are popular that it's probably best not to fall into that trap.
Mm-hmm. I think it works because of the weight of the farewell to the characters.
Yeah.
And because you're so used to seeing, even if it's like a supposed on-screen death of a superhero or what have you, they always come back, or they always get resurrected, or they always avoided death by inches or whatever. And this time it really feels final, and so I think that's why it feels just so good, and also so sad at the same time.
Yeah, well, this film teases the hell out of that as well. They have that long, lingering shot on his on his rocky grave, suggesting that maybe he's just going to punch his way out of that. And imagine, well, I stayed to the end of the credits to see if there was a post-credit scene, and that's the kind of thing you would get in a post-credit scene. Him. A shot of the rocks, and then a rock moving, or his hand coming out, or the claws coming out, or something. And I'm glad that
lifting off the coffin.
Yeah, but well, it reminded me of that exact moment.
Yeah,
but it kind of lets you drink in the moment and the finality of it. It's this funeral, and it is an ending. It's it's his death. It's not. It's not. Oh, look, he's still alive.
Mm-hmm.
Which, they could have so easily have done.
If they'd done that, I would have punched them in the goddamn tits.
I think they did it the right way. I think they sent them off in the right way.
Yeah, and I quite like how one of his last words is, so that's what it feels like. Like he's kind of just about to experience death.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that he could never do. It's just, it's a really poignant ending for the character. But,
definitely.
Yeah, but recasting Wolverine, it's going to happen sometime. I mean, what
no!
we'll do... Well,
Tell
the thing
not
is,
to bother.
We're a generation that's seen X-Men films, for 17 years, with Hugh Jackman mostly in front of all of them. But there are generations coming up who won't watch the X-Men films in that way, or won't have that connection to them, and they'll be, eventually they'll be willing to accept a new version of the character. If you look at, like, Superman, for instance, Christopher Reeve owned that part for so many years. And then eventually it gets to the point where enough people forget or are willing to accept something new that they let someone else have a go. Batman's another one. I mean, he's never been iconically tied to a particular actor, but, these things move on, and I think the character's profitable, so I think we will eventually have a new one. Or Star Trek, for instance, Captain Kirk, Spock, they were so iconically embodied by Nimoy and Shatner, etc. And people did accept Zachary Quinto and Chris Pine and Carl Urban and so on. So, I don't think it's impossible for me to accept a new Wolverine. As long as it's not like right away.
Yeah, I think that's why it's difficult to imagine recasting right now, because I think that they will, or if they're wise, they'll leave it for long enough time that we can kind of let this portrayal of him rest. And then by the time they come to recast it, it's going to be someone that, we wouldn't have any clue who it would be right now, because they're probably far too young.
Yeah, we don't know them. They're probably in some backwater TV show that we'll never, that nobody watches.
Yeah.
But, it could happen. And there's probably, there's other actors that could do it, just not really not really put their stamp on it in the same way. It's, I mean, eventually we'll need a new Iron Man because, Robert Downey Jr. isn't ageless. And it's just, these things move on. And if they want to keep making films about these characters, you'll just have to deal with it eventually, and there'll be a point where a certain audience won't accept it and they won't watch it, but there'll be plenty that will. I mean, we already put up with the recasting of Magneto and Xavier. They were mostly pretty good. Mm-hmm. They were good casting. So there's, I think it could happen, and I'm not.
I think it will. I just, for now, I can't see it, or I hope it won't be done, and for a few years yet. Hopefully they'll let Wolverine rest for a bit. He deserves it after all that.
You've got Laura now, and you can tell those kinds of stories with her. And I think they could retool her slightly and bring her into the actual continuity-driven X-Men films in some way. I mean, they do hint at her in the post-credit scene for X-Men Apocalypse, for instance. So they could do that with Laura, and you can have this feral type character who is very violent and so on. But it just depends what they're planning next. I don't think that Fox know what they're going to do with the character next.
Yeah, I don't know.
Ryan Reynolds will have to fly the flag for a while, with his Deadpool.
Yeah.
He'll be the money. He'll be the cash cow for a while.
Hopefully that does kind of pay off. Well, hopefully it continues to pay off for them, because I would quite like that to fill the void, and that would mean that they wouldn't rush to make a Wolverine reboot or somehow recast Wolverine too quickly. I think that probably could work because obviously Deadpool was very successful, and I'm hoping that it continues on that way.
Yeah, give it 5 years, and maybe people will be open to a new Wolverine.
Yeah.
Or when they drag Hugh Jackman out of retirement somehow, he just can't let go, and he just keeps coming out, and eventually he is like 90 years old and still playing Wolverine. But I mean, anything could happen, and I think Fox aren't going to let the character die for too long, but maybe long enough.
Natalie, what do you think?
What about what?
About the potential recasting of a Wolverine?
Don't do it. I don't know why it's
and that's why they should leave it for a while.
I just don't know why we're so fixated on rotating characters and stories and
we're not.
And all of that, and I just am like, they've done this. Like, why do they need to go back to it? They don't. Like, it had a perfect ending. We've explored that character for 17 years now, and I mean, really properly, I think, in the last couple of years in movies, that Wolverine origins, all of that. I don't know why you would need to find yourself back at that character.
For all the dollars, Canadian
no,
and US.
Come on, like, seriously, find a new fucking story.
Oh.
Like, what? There are other comics out there waiting to be made into a movie.
It's a popularity thing, I've said on previous podcasts, whenever Marvel launch a new character, Spider-Man will turn up in the first 5 or so issues because he's popular, and people will buy a comic because Spider-Man's in it, and they'll get an introduction to that character.
The times, and I think what made this so poignant is that we all recognised that it was necessary for this character to end. And it's been around for 17 years in the movies. It's been around in the comics for, when was the first X-Men comic out?
In the 60s, I forget which exact
Come
year.
on, do you know what I mean? Like, that's coming up 60 years. Like,
well, the Wolverine wasn't invented until like the 70s, so.
Right. Well, thanks for leaving that out.
He's just a whippersnapper.
It's still a long time. It's still a long time, and I just feel like
his first appearance was in a Hulk comic, actually.
So all the wee new mutants, if they're gonna do a story about that, let them do a story about that. But I just feel like they don't need to come back and explain or redo or multiple timeline, whatever, any other part of this. I think they should go with a fresher direction if that's what they're wanting.
You hear that, Fox executives?
That's what I want. That's what I want.
Well, they were interested in what I had to say about Fantastic Four, so
come and watch it again. We'll change your mind. You should have got some free shit off
and
of
about that poster you tried to sell on eBay, Natalie.
Stop throwing me under the bus.
Come
People
on.
will be listening. It was a long time ago.
Statute of limitations as well.
I needed
on that one.
I had an electricity bill to pay, okay? I'm sorry.
Cease and desist.
And I just really hated your film and wasn't willing to change my opinion for nothing. Although, if
Stop trying to buy his love.
yeah. Although if you're going to buy it, make it a significant price tag. That's all I'm saying.
But also, can you thank someone for making the Logan's retrospective, because it's just taken me a while to find it because I could only find it in Spanish. It's the it's almost 4 minutes long. This is what I watched yesterday morning when I was still heartbroken. And it's Wolverine, Logan's retrospective, 2000 to 2017, with Hurt playing, and it is tremendous.
It'll be in the show notes. I'll find it for the show notes.
I can send it to you. I can only find it on Vimeo at the moment, but
it'll be on YouTube. Don't worry.
Did you watch it? Did you watch?
I've seen it. Yeah, I have seen it. Yeah.
I tagged you in it earlier, and you didn't say anything, and I thought it's because you'd sent me, you sent us a video, and I thought, fuck, if you just sent us a video that I didn't watch,
because Craig's
that you tagged me in,
wasn't working because it was covered in tears.
Oh, that video that you sent us. That 35-second long one, that should be in the show notes as well, because...
Oh, it's going to be. Don't worry.
That was... Sometimes I don't click on things, but I clicked on it, and I really enjoyed watching it, and it was really good fun. It's Hugh Jackman doing additional dialogue, and just basically...
Additional grunting.
Yeah, and just cutting about, pretending to be slashing things. But I don't know, he looked really cute. So I was very happy.
It reminded me of that scene in Real Steel, where he's like shadowboxing as
well, I didn't see that movie because it looks shit.
It's very good. I love it.
Oh.
Yeah. So, recast Wolverine. You're not a fan. You're not a fan of recasting Wolverine.
I just don't know why people get so hung up on redoing the same things. Like, get something new.
I'm willing to accept it, but not right now.
And I hope that whoever plays him is currently being developed in the lab, and so it won't be for another 20 years.
That's what it's going to be. They're just going to clone Hugh Jackman, a younger Hugh Jackman, and have him return to the role every time.
Well, they've done it before.
They've done it before, or maybe they could CGI him like Tarkin style,
Yeah, get Peter Cushing to do it.
Angus.
There are options. We have the technology.
We do.
We can build them, make them stronger.
Yeah, but we don't want to spend a lot of money.
Well, I feel like I've been a bit incoherent, and I've babbled a lot, and I've said how heartbroken and sad I am.
Choking back the tears.
But I also think that I've said what I didn't like about the movie. And I feel a bit bad about that because I feel like I was harsh on Stephen Merchant.
Yeah, sorry,
I actually
Stephen
really
Merchant.
like him. I actually love you. And
the old monster.
Yeah.
I liked his Caliban. Yeah.
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 I felt bad for him.
Lloyd Holbrook, loved it.
Yeah, I liked him too. I've never seen him before, but I liked his face.
Narcos, watch season 1 and 2, available on Netflix.
We're not sponsoring this.
Hey, yeah. But did we cover the last part? The bit before we wrap up? Did we cover Hugh Jackman's impact as Wolverine?
Yeah, extensively.
Yes.
I feel like this whole podcast has been that. So I was just making sure that we. Ow.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this is one of many love letters to Wolverine.
Oh,
yeah.
I really want to go watch them all and steal that kid's Wolverine action figure.
Yeah, that's one thing we should talk about. Comic books in a comic book movie starring the characters that are in that film.
Yeah, and he's like, the coordinates to Eden. That's just from this comic.
Yeah, well, I quite liked that because it was something in a comic book that was brought to life and used as part of the story for this film. It is actually an adaptation, if you think about it. Because the kids use the coordinates as a meeting point.
Yes, they do.
Because so they read it in a comic and applied it to real life.
Yeah,
interesting.
That was really I liked that. And actually, we didn't talk about the movie all that much, but that whole part where he is going to go to get more money to take her to this certain place, and he realizes it's this fantasy and that it's not real, and then he doesn't know what to do with her. That was also heartbreaking. And he buys her the unicorn outfit and lets her get another dime or something for that mechanical horse.
Yeah, well, otherwise she was going to cut the place up, so he didn't have much of a choice there.
Yeah.
But it's like he really did teach her lessons.
But yeah, I found the use of the comics in there because it kind of highlights the whole, how this whole superhero thing is glorified. And it's rightly so. People are like, I've got powers, it's amazing. And of course it is. I mean, it is. It's great to have superpowers and be able to do all these amazing things. And, in the comics... multiple people. Yeah.
Don't you think that was like a great, great link between the older movies and now? Because, I think the older movies, the early ones, they sort of glamorized all of that and had them in shiny suits and stuff, and now he's all...
The older films didn't. The older films had them in that really boring leather stuff. It was... the costumes were pretty maligned in the early films.
But they're wearing costumes. Like, he's not wearing a costume in this one. Do you know what I
mean? Well, they're wearing uniforms, but they aren't, they're costumes.
Yeah, but they are costumes, because back in the day, they're dressed a particular way to represent what a superhero looks like. They're dressed in a particular way in their comics because they're putting that sort of glamour over what their role is.
Unless you're Beast, because he just cut about in his pants.
Yeah, but he doesn't do that at all in this movie. He is in his own clothes. He's been like that in the last couple of movies, but he's wearing his own stuff. And
he's only worn a costume in 3 of the films.
I don't know that, Craig. I haven't counted, okay? But I've seen them in the earlier ones, and they're all...
And it's only small parts of those films. Yeah. But yeah, he's always in his... He's always in his tank top, jeans, leather jacket combo. Most of the time.
But when he's in a costume, he's in a costume, like the leather stuff, I am reading that in the movie as like when he's looking at the comics. I see that as like a total like comment on the earlier movies and the glamorized like versions of that as to where they are now. The grittier versions, and
I think it's also a comment on other comic book movies, or at least the way I see it, because they make a defined point about saying that, in real life people die and it's not fun and it's, these are just stories for kids and whatever. I mean, I love the Marvel films, but they are aimed at a decisively young audience, and, there are certain levels of darkness that they just won't cross into because it'll be off-putting to large amounts of people. So they kind of... Yeah. And I don't think they will, at least not anytime soon.
Well, give it 10 years, we'll have a weird Death of Thor movie. And
well, they do that kind of stuff in their Netflix shows. That's where they do all their darkness. But what the comics seen in Logan do is tell you that this isn't that kind of film. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it necessarily says that those kinds of films are bad or anything like that. It's just telling you that they're not going that way. They're doing something different. Because even the solo Wolverine films have had a kind of comic book flair about them, or the other X-Men films are kind of larger than life, and in a lot of ways, especially the more recent ones. Days of Future Past is about as comic book silliness as it gets, and X-Men Apocalypse, you see the costumes for like the first time and all that stuff, but this film is just, it's about people, and these people happen to be comic book characters.
Yeah. Can you add, because you've made this go into my head now, can you add a link to Backstreet Boys' Larger Than Life music video? Because I've got that in my head now.
I don't know.
Makes you larger than life. Dun, 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 dun.
Oh, no. The music police have come to get you.
Yeah. I think it'll sit nicely with Johnny Cash's song at the end.
So now what we need to do is do an alternate cut of this film, but put the Backstreet Boys in it and see how the tone.
Oh my god! Please, someone don't do that.
No, let's not do that. But yeah, I almost forgot about the comics within comics, or within comic book movies, because it's, I don't know, it's not something that's made too fine a point of. I think that it does show up, and the fact that you've got a Wolverine action figure in there is really good as well, because it's it is kind of I suppose to these people he does represent that comic book hero side of things, because he does get to become Wolverine one last time when he injects himself with that magic drug. So he gets to go on one final rampage that doesn't last long.
He took it all at once. Mm-hmm. I know, I really thought that he'd get more out of that, and I thought that we were going to go for something super epic, and 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 it's just like there's
He's
just
just
no
too broken
beating it.
down.
There's just no beating it at all.
Just
And
too broken down.
Yeah, he has a short sprint, and then that's him.
what was your favourite? Can I just ask, because I have an answer to this, but what was your favourite scene in the movie? Like maybe not like a super major scene, but for example, this is one of my favourites, and it's not really like a huge part of the movie, but there's a scene where Laura has been shot in the arm and she's in the back of the car and she sucks the bullet out and spits it onto the floor. And I really liked that, and it was just like a really small scene, but there was something in that I absolutely loved as a scene.
My favourite scene, I think, was when Xavier was talking about having the most perfect day he'd had in a long time. Because the thing is, I mean, I'd watch Patrick Stewart reading the dictionary. I really would. But when he gets to really dig into like really intense emotional monologues like that, it's it's captivating to watch. And the fact that he's playing someone who's so frail but has a bit of pride about him, it's just, that scene is just great, and
real and powerful. I mean, let's not forget, he's super powerful still.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he is, and but his power can't be controlled, and he's a danger to everyone around him, which is,
which leads to one of my favourite scenes, which is when he's having the seizure in the hotel, and it's a kind of a play on the sort of Quicksilver thing where Logan and Laura are tearing the place up, but as best they can, while everyone else is kind of
combobulated
in the thralls of this seizure. And then it's really graphic as well, because Wolverine just utterly tears the place up. Many heads stabbed, and then everyone kind of falls to the ground after they manage to inject Xavier.
Although that's the one thing I couldn't work out. How come they didn't realise they were dead until Xavier's seizure stopped? They were still standing, even though their brains had been impaled. So they were dead, and
they were held. Like the vibrations are holding them in place. Like,
well, it's not really vibrations. Like Xavier's not telekinetic. It's just his telepathy is causing people.
But it's so strong that it's creating these force ripples. This is my fansplanation.
Yeah.
Because you can almost, they try to create like a visual idea of like the strength of like the mind power, and it's created these like incredible force ripples that's like holding everyone in place, and they're the only ones that are able to move like beyond that. Like, that was good too.
Yeah, it was almost kind of dimensional rather than mental.
Yeah, and I think that's what it's become like. And it was good.
And I liked how Xavier was apologising on the way out as well. It's just obviously he doesn't want to be like this. And,
it's so sad.
Yes, it's incredibly grim. It's a very depressing film.
I'm gonna watch it again. I might let myself cry this time. I try to stop myself.
I will definitely see it again. Yeah. Maybe not in the cinema, but somewhere. I will watch it again. Yeah. And again, and again, and again.
Yeah, I can see myself watching it again. Definitely. Which is a good thing.
So, on that note, I think we should wrap things up, because
it's been 2 hours almost. Jesus.
We're according to my recording, we're currently about half an hour less than the running time of the film, so we're doing okay. So it's almost a commentary track, but not quite.
It's a commentary.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as a wrap-up, everyone loved the film. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, Godspeed, Hugh Jackman. Good work. Good work.
And Patrick Stewart.
Pour one out for
and
Charlie.
Patrick Stewart, yes. Patrick Stewart.
And the poor
always
family.
Magnificent.
Poor innocent family.
Yep.
Those poor innocent families, yes.
Yeah, and the horses.
The horses escaped, it was fine.
Yeah. And the creepy corn syrup fields with weird robots and shit. That was weird.
Yeah.
That's my final comment though.
Classic wrapping up.
Yeah, right. and that. I actually feel like we've barely touched any of the movie, and I could actually probably talk for another hour, but I'm aware that it's quite late. I'm aware that I can't work all day and I'm tired. So.
I think we've covered quite a lot of it, actually. We've covered all the bases that I wanted to cover.
Yeah,
there,
I just wanted
yeah.
to keep talking about how sad it made me. Which is really weird.
It's been a great therapy session.
It has. It's good to digest it.
No,
and,
I've got more questions and I want to watch it again.
well, it's good to say that a film makes you want to watch it again, because you see so many where they're like, yeah, okay, I've seen that. Don't really need to see it again. But this one, no, I do want to see it again and again. It will proudly adorn my Blu-ray shelf one day.
Okay. Are we done?
Yes. I will bid all thee good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Thanks
night.
for having us.
That was our discussion of Logan, where we covered all the mixed emotions and pain. Thank you to YouTuber John Pumper for his haunting rendition of the Logan main title we heard at the beginning. And thank you to the other YouTuber, 331eRock, for the more uplifting X-Men 90s theme that can be heard now. If you enjoyed what you heard here, then please do subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, or any major podcasting app. And tune in to the next Kneel Before Pod.